I'm quite the open-minded type. I'm also a pacifist. Shin says, first, what's your relation to strong sword, I mean, sword phantom? Yu Ilshin thinks, I'm a god, and he's the religious zealot. But I can't say that. Yu Ilshin says, oh, you scared me. We're just co-workers. He thinks, I'm a teacher and sword phantom's a teaching assistant, so I'm technically saying the truth. But why does he need to ask me so threateningly? Shin asks, then, are you also a part of the Three Heroes Society? Yu Ilshin says, Three Heroes Society? What's that? Yu Ilshin thinks, Three Heroes Society? Is that some ripoff of the Triad? Well, what does it have to do with me anyway? Shin gets angry and says, I guess words won't resolve this. Shin attacks him. Yu Ilshin sees that and thinks, he's slow. But it might hurt if I fight. As Yu Ilshin was about to use skill share, Swords comes inside through the window by breaking it. Sword Phantom is ready to attack and says, you bastard. What are you doing to the sword god? Shin is surprised. Sword Phantom swings his sword with full power. Shin dodges the sword. He says, you strong sword, you finally came to see me. Sword Phantom says, stop with the nonsense. Sword Phantom swings the sword. Shin dodges the attack by jumping. Shin says, why don't you take my calls? He says, shut up. Shin attacks him and says, but you're still nothing compared to me. Sword Phantom blocks the attack with his sword. Sword Phantom says, I blocked your number because you were acting like a stalker. Shin says, what? You blocked my number. No wonder. Yu Ilshin sees them and thinks, how do they know each other? Sword Phantom gets really angry and says, now you're even bothering my master. You have a death wish, huh? Shin says, what? Master him. Sword Phantom says, impertinent. Do you know who he is? He's my master and the great sword god who has reached the ultimate realm of swordsmanship. If you're also a real swordsman, then you would kneel down to him in worship. Shin gets angry and says, worship. Kneel. I did heat that the Three Heroes Society is a cult. You're really deep in, strong sword. Yu Ilshin thinks, so what's with this Three Heroes Society? Is it something like the Pork Belly Society? Shin thinks, sword god. So he's the guy that made strong sword like this. I'll reveal your identity. Shin says, Mr. Yu Ilshin. Yu Ilshin says, what now? Shin covers his hand in aura and says, if you're the sword god, I'm sure you can deflect something like this, right? Shin uses Serpent Sword class Poison Fang. Sword Phantom says to Yu Ilshin, please show that worm your greatness. He needs a beating before he understands anything. Yu Ilshin says, is that so? Well, that's great. I wanted to test how strong I've become. Yu Ilshin smiles and thinks, I've become much stronger after saving the ants. Well, he's an S class, so he won't die. He's a great test dummy. Skill share Ilho. Strong body. Shin sees him and thinks, this must be a skill from the Three Heroes Society. Did he kill Gustav with that? Either way, it's just some wretched skill of some random cult. For me, whose strongest point is speed? Shin jumps toward Yu Ilshin with super speed. Shin thinks, super. Muscular guys are the slowest. Yu Ilshin sees him and thinks, slow, he's way too slow. Worm fist or snake fist or whatever, it doesn't matter because I'm gonna destroy him. Yu Ilshin gets really excited and is about to punch Shin. Shin gets scared. Mina gets there and says, it's so damn loud. I said you guys are loud. Yu Ilshin thinks, I forgot. Mina was sleeping here. She walks toward Shin. Shin says, Mina, why are you here? Mina says, you're bad. Mina uses mind control. Yu Ilshin says, wait. Mina. She says, anyone who bullies our god should die. Shin chose out blood and says, I can't breathe. Strong sword. Shin falls to the ground. Sword Phantom checks that he is alive or not. Yu Ilshin gets scared and asks, is he dead? Sword Phantom says, it's a shame. He's still alive. He's not one to give up easily. Yu says, I'm glad. I thought we were gonna have murder case on our hands. Sword Phantom picks him and says, since he has disturbed you, I will throw him away somewhere adequate and come right back. Yu Ilshin says, wit. If I heal him with God's healing ring finger. Yu Ilshin gets scared and says, he won't kill him, will he? He swore to be nice. Mina comes closer to him and says, are you okay? He says, yes of course. Mina says, don't worry. I'll protect you as your Unni. Yu Ilshin thinks, you're my Nuna. Funny as a bit. Miri comes running and says, "Are you okay, teacher? I felt a tremendous flow of energy just now." Miri sees them and says, "What is this situation?" Yu Ilshin says, "Miri, so this is." Miri asks, "All this blood on the floor, what happened here?" Mina says, "Miri, I wanna go home. I was so scared." Yu Ilshin says, "That's great. Miri, will you please take her home?" Mira says, "Yes, I can do that." After that we see that Yu Ilshin is cleaning all the blood from the floor. Yu Ilshin thinks, "I'm a god, why should I clean this mess?" But someone's got OT. Tears of the Bountiful Abundance says that you are doing good things and sends a heart emoji. Yu Ilhin gets emotional and says, "You're the only friend I have." Ma Youngji gets there and says, "Mr. Yu Ilshin." She is surprised to see the blood and says, "What's all this?" Yu Ilshin says, "It's nothing, I just fell." "But what is it?" She says, "The thing is." Yu Ilshin sees her and thinks, "Why is she so nervous? Is it something serious?" He says, "What is it? Don't worry and say it." She says, "So, my grandpa really wants to meet you, but I think you should run away." Yu Ilshin says, "What? Your grandfather, why? Why should I run?" She says, "Well, that's." Hades says, "Sir, I greet you, sir." He says, "Oh, Hades, you're doing well." She says, "Grandpa noticed that Hades evolved, and he said he really wants to meet you along with my sister." She hears the sound of a car and says, "Well then, good luck. I'll get going." She runs away. Yu Ilshin thinks, "Good luck." She thinks, "I'm sorry, teacher." He looks outside of the window and says, "What's up with her?" Their black limo outside. Someone wearing purple clothes come out of it. Yu Ilshin sees him and thinks, "What? Is that the old man I saw at the Hunter Association?" Go Ma Youngji, her last name is Go, then. The immortal guildmaster Go Seiduk is Go Ma Youngji's grandfather. Also a girl comes out of the car looking like a ghost. Yu Ilshin sees her and thinks, "And who's that ghost-like lady next to him?" Principal says, "You zombie bastard. What brings you to my sacred school? Where do you think you are?" Go Seiduk says, "Is that any of you business, old muscle man?" Principal and Seiduk looks toward each other with angry looks. Principal says, "I'm gonna kill you if you try an experiment on my students again." Seiduk says, "Don't worry. I just came to see what kind of school my granddaughter is attending. And to meet someone." Principal says, "Meet someone? Who?" Seiduk says, "I heard Yu Ilshin is here." Principal says, "Yu Ilshin?" Seiduk says, "Yeah, I have something to talk to him about." Yu Ilshin is surprised to hear that and says, "Does he know that I took Crocky?" "How?" After that we see they are all sitting in the principal's office and drinking tea. Yu Ilshin thinks, "What excuse do I make? Should I just play dumb and say it wasn't me?" Seiduk says, "Right, we've met before, haven't we? How old are you?" Yu Ilshin says, 23. And thinks, "I'll just act as natural as I can." Seiduk says, 23, the 3-year difference is perfect. Girl with him says, "You're embarrassing me, grandfather." Yu Ilshin thinks, perfect. What is he talking about? Plus, it's more like he's 3 decades older than me, isn't he? Seiduk says, "My future grandson-in-law, nice to meet you." Yu Ilshin is really surprised and says, "What? Grandson-in-law?" Yu Ilshin thinks, "Is he telling me to marry that woman?" Seiduk says, "My son-in-law." Yu Ilshin says, "No. I prefer being single. I don't intend on marrying. I'm sorry." Yu Ilshin thinks, "Since when was I against marriage?" "Since right now." Seiduk says, "I heard you evolved the B-class zombie soldier, Hades, to S-class." Yu Ilshin is surprised and thinks, "Oh. I get why my Youngji was acting like that now." Seiduk says, "I've never seen a skill like that before. You think I'd let someone like you go? I don't want much from you. Just give birth to 3 sons. That's all I need. I want your bloodline." Yu Ilshin gets angry and thinks, "So he wants to use me. Son-in-law. In your dreams, old man." Seiduk gives him something. He asks, "What is this?" He is really surprised. Seiduk says, "It's a check for 1 trillion won. I'll give this to you if you become my son-in-law." Principal is really surprised and says, "What? 1 trillion? Principal says to Yu Ilshin, "Shouldn't you do this if 1 trillion is at stake? It does feel like you're being sold away, but..." Yu Ilshin says, 1 trillion won. He thinks, that is very tempting, I would never have to worry about deadlines ever again. But, her face. It's like she's already died 4 times and I waiting for me to come to the grave too. I can't marry a woman like that. Yu Ilshin stands up and says, I'm disappointed trying to buy love with money. I can't accept a marriage like this. Yu Ilshin starts to walk away and thinks, let's run away. Seiduk's granddaughter says, wait. Yu Ilshin says, yes. She fixes her here. A message popped up saying, go my young way, a mix between a human and a witch 20 years old. Remark, possesses the potential of transcending. She has charming eyes that can seduce any man. Principal gets angry and says, no. Don't look into her eyes. She activates skill, captivating eye. She asks him, what do you think about my eyes, Oppa? He says, wow, they're very pretty. She says, Oppa please. Won't you become mine? Principal gets angry and says, my young way you. Don't try to play with Ilshin with that evil skill. That's not what love is. Seduek stops Principal and says, nope. You're dead if you try and do anything to my granddaughter. Principal says, you're both crazy. You know how many men have lost their minds to that skill. It no effect on Yu Ilshin, and Yu Ilshin says, no. She is surprised and says, what? Yu Ilshin says, do you want me to repeat myself? I don't want to be yours. You're not my type. Yu Ilshin opens the door and walks out of the office. Yu Ilshin says, telling me become yours. You shouldn't treat people like objects. I'm leaving. Everyone is really surprised. She thinks, my captivating eye didn't work. Who is that man? Yu Ilshin bites his hand and thinks about 1 trillion. Yu Ilshin starts to walk and thinks, well, it's a shame, but it's better than getting killed by that woman. Captivating eye, she has a unique skill. Even though it doesn't work on me. Anyway, a mix between a human and a witch, then is her mother the. A portal opens behind him. A lot of hands come out of the portal and grabs him. They pull him into the portal. Seduek and his granddaughter are sitting in the car and going. She is fixing her makeup. Seduek asks her, so, what do you think about the husband candidate? She says, I like him very much. Seduek asks her, so, why did you come with that makeup? Your face was very. She says, Grandpa, do you think a man who marries me for my looks would be a good man? Seduek says, well, that's true. But I didn't expect you captivation eye to not work. She says, that's what made me want to have him even more. Only S-class hunters and other very advanced hunters can withstand my captivating eye. Seduek says, don't worry, he's already in the palm of my hand. She says, what do you mean? Grandpa, did you? Seduek gives an evil smile. Yu Ilshin thinks, is this Go Seiduk's pocket? I didn't think he'd go to these lengths. But these things are. There are some really big monster in front of him. Yu Ilshin sees them and thinks, why are they all salivating like that? A window appears in front of him saying, Go Seiduk's Yaksha soldier. Go Seiduk, the necromancer's lifelong collection of Yaksha soldiers. Remark, they are ordered to kidnap Yu Ilshin, but they are considering disobeying the orders and eating Yu Ilshin instead. Yu Ilshin thinks, what, they want to eat me? Yu Ilshin smiles and thinks, that's real funny. A monster appears behind Yu Ilshin ready to attack. Yu Ilshin think, you dare try and eat me? Monster swing the weapon. Yu Ilshin uses strong body. Monster's weapon breaks. Yu Ilshin says, you guys are no match for me. Maybe if there are 1 trillion of you, though, you might be a match. I'm a low-class god now, you bastards. Yu Ilshin punches the monster. Monster goes flying really high. Other monster is surprised to see that. Yu Ilshin smiles and says, you're large, but it's all just flesh. All of you, come at me instead of lazing around. Yu Ilshin starts to beat them up really quick. Yu Ilshin says, you guys are nothing compared to a legion of 1,000 ants. Yu Ilshin uses God's condemning middle finger. He burns them. 2 really big monsters see that and thinks, what king of skill is that? Our Yaksha soldiers, who have never lost before, have just been defeated. All by himself. Is he perhaps? He has the gaze of a god. Yu Ilshin sees them and thinks, are they the leaders? One of them's a woman. They gets really scared to see him. A window appears saying, Go Seiduk's Yaksha general. Remark, was once a follower of strong and deceitful beast. Another window appears saying, Go Seiduk's Yaksha general. Remark, was once a follower of seducing knight of sexual desires. Yu Ilshin thinks, what two evil god followers. I can see why Go Seiduk's so strong. But, 5-color eyes. It reminds me of Go Myunglee's eyes. General jumps toward Yu Ilshin with super speed. Other general says, no. Yu Ilshin says, you're a bit strong. He uses God's crushing forefinger. General gets crushed on the ground. General tries to get up but he was not able to. Other general tries to use captivating eye on Yu Ilshin, but is not affected at all. She thinks, he must be the rumored, young god that's supposed to be very powerful. She walks toward him and thinks, if it's him. She stands right in front of him. He thinks, what? Is he volunteering to be beat up? She kneel down in front of Yu Ilshin. She says, young god, please have mercy on us. Yu Ilshin thinks a yaksha is using psychic skill. Who is she? Yu Ilshin activates Bind God's Eye. System says, skimming through Yaksha Great General's history. Before she became a Yaksha, her name was Lilith. She was the daughter and follower of Seducing Night of Sexual Desires. Seducing Night was a great evil goddess but she lost to the god of destruction and barely managed to run away. However, she and her world were already dying. In order to regain her powers, she needed the soul of a strong and innocent S-class. That is why she sent Lilith of Captivating Eye to Earth and how Lilith met Go Seiduk. She says to Seduek, what my captivating eye, someone like you is easy too. Seduek says, to her what the hell? Screw off. I don't have time for you. But Captivating Eye did not work on Go Seiduk at all. Lilith fell in love with him instead, married him, and even gave birth to a child. But Lilith's identity was found out by Eth god of destruction's nether dragon, and she was brought to the brink of death. Seduek is crying while holding her in his arms. He says, Lilith. Let's from a contract. You can grant my wish and offer my soul to her. My wish. Yu Ilshin thinks, so she's Go Myunglee's grandmother. Granting a soul a wish is an unwritten law that's been passed since ancient times. Yu Ilshin says to her, so, Go Seiduk's wish was to revive you, and you rejected. That's why he made you into a yaksha. I guess he wanted to be with you forever even in this way. Bountiful Abundance wipes a tear and asks you to have mercy on her. Yu Ilshin says, she tried to eat me, though. Mercy. I don't know about that. Bountiful Abundance is taken aback. Yu Ilshin smiles and says, but, I don't think it's a bad idea. System says. Lilith. Remark, married. S-class possessing transcendence potential raise her will, she may become your follower. Yu Ilshin thinks, of course, I'll have mercy. She could be my next S-class follower. Plus, I could get Go Seiduk as a +1 deal. Perhaps even his granddaughter. 3 birds with 1 stone. The 1000 blade that cuts all, praises you for being calculating like him. Bountiful Abundance thanks you for having mercy. What's most important is that I get stronger. I need to get stronger before that god of destruction or whatever invades. I hate that bastard. Yu Ilshin equips good god title. A hollow appears his head. He sees that and thinks, I get something like this now that I'm a low-class god. I've got a good feeling. Yu Ilshin heals her, and thinks, I feel like something good's gonna happen no matter what I do. God's healing ring finger. Yu Ilshin heals every sing yaksha around him. She starts melt and she starts to cry and says, why? Young god. All the yaksha starts to melt and screams with pain. Yu Ilshin says, why are you all melting? What? This is a good god skill. This is definitely a healing skill. System says, the yaksha soldiers are being purified. A bit of will be accompanied due to the exchange of evil and good. All the yaksha become little angels. She says, ah, young god. I was mistaken, this feeling. It feel like I've been reborn. System says, the yaksha soldiers have been resurrected as angel soldiers thanks to Yu Ilshin's mercy. Yu Ilshin thinks, angel soldiers. That's no what I expected at all. But more importantly, why did they get so much smaller? A great evil god opens her eyes and says, Lilith, you're back. Traitor bitch. Yu Ilshin thinks I guess that results of evolution and resurrection are random. Their appearance is not what I expected at all. Bountiful Abundance says that is all you can do as a low-class god and that you should just accept it. Yu Ilshin says, but resurrection. I better hurry to Go Seiduk. Before he dies. After that we see at Immortal Guild headquarters. Seiduk is standing by a window and says, Yu Ilshin, that bastard, How dare he reject the position of being my son-in-law? Arrogant bastard. I'm sure he's learned a lesson by now. He thinks my pocket plane is also called smaller hell. Even S-classes who enter come back out crawling. He says, Yaksha soldiers, you may now release Yu Ilshin. Some really bright light comes out of his pocket's realm. Yu Ilshin and angel soldiers come out the portal. Saduek says, what's this? Yu Ilshin comes out and says, did you call for me? Saduek is really surprised and says, you. How are you this normal? Yu Ilshin looks around and says, what a nice office. Saduek says, what are these flies? Where are my Yaksha soldiers? Yu Ilshin says, it's a long story, let's treat you chest first. Saduek says, how do you know about that? Wait, what are you talking about? Saduek gets angry and thinks, something's off. I can't sense any of the Yaksha soldiers, Lilith. I can't sense Lilith either. He grabs Yu Ilshin from the neck and says, what have you done to Lilith? Yu Ilshin sees a really big spirit in front of him. And thinks, I need to hurry up and treat him. Saduek says, Lilith, you. Yu Ilshin says, it just happened. We need to treat you first. Saduek gets really angry and says, what? I'll make it so that you can never talk again. Yu Ilshin says, I have no choice. I'll treat you real quick if you just sleep for a bit. Yu Ilshin uses God's weekly crushing forefinger. Saduek starts feel really strong pain in his chest. Yu Ilshin thinks, I didn't do anything. Did it already start? System says, go Saduek make 61 years old. Remark, acquainted with seducing night of sexual desires. Lilith comes flying toward him. Saduek says, this skill, is it you? Lilith says, yes, it's me, Lilith. I was resurrected thanks to Yu Ilshin. I can see you now outside the pocket plane whenever I want. I still have to use my spirit skill, but... Saduek cough out blood. She says, God. Please. Lilith's remaining background story is being shown. We see a flashback. Where the great good says, you dare betray me because of this inferior bastard. You think I will just sit and watch? She says, the day you are resurrected. The day Go Saduk's wish comes true. His soul will be mine to eat. I will give him all of the world's pain and despair and rip him to pieces. That is the prophecy I give as a great evil goddess. Yu Ilshin says, not under my watch. I'll protect my precious S-classes. Yu Ilshin says, Go Saduk, excuse me. God's crushing forefinger. Yu Ilshin thinks, God's crushing forefinger, has an on and off option for the opponent too. Meaning, I can turn off the seal. Female great god gets really angry and says, you dare. Yu Ilshin, oh, you're finally here. She appears outside of the building. And says, you bastard. You dare put a hat on my offering when you're just a mere low-class god. A status window appears saying, seducing knight. Female, 690,000 years old. Remark, a deteriorated being who used to be a goddess once. Yu Ilshin thinks, a deteriorated being. So something, like that son of God ripoff I killed last time. Yu Ilshin says, nice to meet you, seducing knight. Yu Ilshin says, I don't have my divine sword, and I also haven't skill shared with Sword Phantom. Heavenly demonic god sword. But I don't need those to fight a ripoff god. Yu Ilshin jumps toward her. He breaks the window and goes outside. Yu Ilshin says, you're the inferior one here. Yu Ilshin says, heavenly demonic god sword. He punches her. He falls, lands on the ground. A man standing there says, a rupture. Run. Yu Ilshin says, to them, get out of here, everyone, I'll take care of things. She is bleeding out of her mouth and says, you dare attack me. Yu Ilshin says, what? She says, I was once a being an inferior low-class god did not even dare to look at. See my real appearance. Yu Ilshin says, what real appearance?